Before we hop into this episode, I have one favor to ask of you. If you've got any kind of information or inspiration from this podcast, it would mean the world to me if you hit the subscribe button. Just like most podcasts out there are more people that watch this show that are not subscribed than that are subscribed. And so if you want to help me get bigger and better guests for this show as we go along, and I hope you do stick along, it would mean the world to me to hit that subscribe button so that we can make it happen. Thank you. Let's get into the interview. You work with professional athletes, NFL, MLB, UFC, NHL, boxing world, millionaires, like everything in between. And it's, as I stated before this, it's funny because you're making the unsexy, the stuff that is really not seen in a way sexy to people that seemingly already have it all together. So when people start working with you, how do you kind of help them step into this space of, I guess, mental performance as a whole?
Yeah. Most people come to me out of desperation, I'll be honest. The business people come to me when, the marriage is falling apart or, their business is in big trouble, or the athletes come to me after they have a big loss or when they're in a slump or they have an injury. So usually people come to me from a state of desperation. Now, not all the time, but oftentimes, that pain that comes with running into adversity is usually what gets people moving. And so they're looking for solutions. And so what I always do with any of my clients is I prove it immediately. I prove this woo-woo stuff to them because, I say I am an energy worker and I'm going to help you remove these blockages. And to someone who's a high achiever who has no experience in this field, and be like, what are you talking about? And so I just say, let me show you. And so I always start off the relationship with someone by literally just taking them through some of the blockages they have in their body to get them back into that ultimate state for peak performance, because they know what it feels like when they're in their zone, when they're accessing that flow state, when they're performing their best, whether in sport or business. And so if I can bring them back into that state, they don't care about any of the explanation of whether it's sexy or not. They're like, I want more of that. Take my money.
Yeah, it's funny because you're a mental performance coach, but so much of your work, and seemingly for a lot of people, I've had Dr. Michael Gervais, who's also mental performance coach for the Seahawks and others. You're getting back people into their body. So it's your mental performance coach, but you're almost going at it from a somatic perspective. Has it always been that way? And how do you frame that?
Yeah, it's a great point. I think the deeper you go down your own spiritual path, if you will. And when I say spiritual path, I'm just talking about trying to give your unique gifts to the world, right? We're all good at something. I truly believe in that. I believe everyone has these unique gifts to give. And when you start going down that path, it becomes a spiritual path because you run into this adversity and then you're like, oh, how do I overcome this? Oh, I'm the thing holding back this next step. And so where do you find it? Well, if you're just searching in your head, like you're just going to be going in these cycles of thought, of rational thought, like there's nothing new there. I think what you understand once you get into this field is like you have to go deeper. And what deeper is in the physical body. And a lot of Eastern traditions talk about this, how we have these energy centers in our body. We have the chakras, right? We have these energy highways, the meridians. And so these are really what govern our flow and allow us to get into that peak state, to have our aha moments, to be creative, to perform our best. And so what we found, I think everyone who goes deep into this field, is that it is going to be somatic. It's going to be found in the body. And we call ourselves mental performance coaches because that's a way for people to kind of compartmentalize what we do and be like, yeah, I want to work on my mindset. But what they find out when they come into the coach container is that they're going into their body and all the answers they're looking for are actually in the physical body.
It is so true. Somatic work has been something I'm really diving into more and more this year. I know you're a big Hawkins fan. I see Power versus Force right behind you. That book is going to be so difficult for so many people to just conceptualize. So I understand why you take it from that perspective. Your first sensei came across to you when was it in high school?
Yeah, I think I met him in high school initially but just briefly. And then I didn't even know that he did all this work in the energy training space and meditation and all the advanced modalities until my freshman year of college. And I rode the bench playing college football, came back that off season, walked into a supplement shop and started looking for the magic pill. And instead of the magic pill, he kind of showed me that I was the magic pill and started taking me down this path of understanding these techniques that enhance performance through exploring our inner world. So everything from meditation to hypnosis to mindfulness to neuro-linguistic programming to energy training and all these techniques that, a lot of them are backed up by peer-reviewed research. They just may have different names to them, but a lot of it is there, and it's just an introduction to them. Because when I played football in college, you're not going to get that from your coaches. There was no sports psychologist. Most sports psychologists aren't even aware of these techniques. So introducing me to this whole world just kind of blew my mind. It kind of broke my perception of reality, to be honest, because I thought that I would have learned this stuff when I was in school if it was important.
You'd think, right? I mean, every single thing that I've ever learned that was actually beneficial for my life, I learned after school. And whether it was through the podcast or reading books from people like that, it's just, you learn so much more. I mean, even in college, you were going for something similar to that, but learned nothing about it. So it's like, it's disappointing the system works that way. But again, it's why your book is programmed to fail. There's a reason for it. What were some of the people, or were there any people that he introduced you to early on in your journey that had a big impact on you?
He didn't actually. He is the type of guy who is like, I have an endless well of knowledge and you can get it all here. So he never introduced me to anyone else. It was just the school of Sensei Clay. And so, I didn't really have any other mentors. He's the only one, I'll say, that I've ever had. There are a lot of people in the field of sports psychology or mental performance that, when I was in my early 20s, I'd reach out to and I would look for mentorship from, but just nobody was interested in mentoring me. So I just figured it out on my own.
Crazy. And you started being like a healer to your teammates really early on. We got introduced to this, I guess, this work at a similar age. And it's, to say the least, it's very confronting when you're trying to bring this up to other people. I know that, like you said, when you're working with clients now and in the past, people get results from it. So it's kind of like no denying it. But in the early stages, how was it received?
Yeah, I mean, it was the same thing that I did before. Like, I've always been a let me show you type of guy. Like, my whole experience in school was like, let me tell you, but then not give you any actionable ways to apply this information and make your life better. Like, what are you going to do? You're going to make me healthier? You're going to help me make more money? You're going to improve my relationships? You're going to make me better at my career? Like, what are we doing here? So I'm always someone, I feel like forever, it's been a little bit of chip on my shoulder, I'd say, of like, but a loving chip on my shoulder of like, I just want to show you, like, I don't have something that I'm hiding from you that I'm trying to sell you on that's going to work. Like, I'll just show you. And so I did the same thing when I first started learning these techniques. I learned this advanced meditation techniques that just brought someone deep into a relaxed state, helped them get into that parasympathetic rest and relaxed nervous system, and help just like move the energy around. And so I remember the first time where I had an opportunity with my buddies, not in general, but with my buddies when I went back to college to apply this. Like, my buddy had this really bad migraine. He was in his dorm room in the dark, just suffering. And I was like, you know what? I just had a belief. I was like, let me see if I can heal this for him. And so I went in there with him. I took him through these techniques, relaxation. I had him visualize kind of breaking apart this migraine and having it fall off and fall apart and be soothed. And literally, he had tears of joy because by the end of that session with me, he had no pain. The migraine was gone altogether. And so I did that. And then I just kept on doing that for my friends on my football team. And so they always knew I kind of danced to the beat of my own drummer, but I also came back and dominated on the football field as well. So I had that kind of like, okay, well, he has all these weird meditation and healing modalities that he's working with. Of course, they'd never call it a modality. It's just like, hey, Brandon does his hippie stuff. But I was also playing really well on the football field. And so I kind of showed them that, like, yeah, this is going to help you heal, but it can also help you on the field as well. And so it just kind of snowballed. My athletic trainer gave the nickname the Guru, which probably wasn't the best thing for a 19-year-old at the time, but I took it, man. I ran with it and I loved it. And that's really what set me on this path to where we're having this conversation today. It was like, it feels so good to help people when you uncover your unique gifts. Like, sports never came easy to me. Like, I was always forcing. And like, I got to a level of success, but like I was not going to go beyond that. I didn't have the genetics for it. It just wasn't going to happen for me. And when I found the ability to heal and to help enhance performance through these techniques, like, to be honest, it did come easy to me compared to anything else I'd ever done in my life. And I was like, this is my thing. Let's run with this. And so it was just inspiration and continue to bring that to my friends. And then over the last 15, 16 years, just bring it to all my clients.
So cool, man. We aligned so much in that because baseball was my entire existence. And then I got into coaching, podcasting, and just this development space of both the spiritual, but also the mental aspect of things. And it happened so quick, so early. And it's such a cool space to jump into. But my first coach told me, and it's so aligned with you, is you do a disservice by not bringing your unique gifts into the world. So many people are fearful of imposter syndrome, fear of failure, fear of success, something that a lot of people overthink. But man, like, are you really going to let that stop you from helping people? Because people need your gift, but so many people just don't have the belief that they have a gift. And it's so cool, like helping your friend, even just the belief in itself transmutes all of that energy. How big of a role does belief play?
It's everything. Yeah. Belief is everything, a big premise around my book, Program to Fail, is that most of us are not aware of our beliefs, and many of them work for us to our advantage, especially with a lot of the people that I'm working with. It's like, well, you don't get into the NFL or MLB being 100% programmed to fail. You're mostly programmed to succeed, but there are ways in which you're being programmed. You have been programmed to fail through some of your beliefs you picked up unconsciously. And so those are the things that, you stub your toe on, or that trigger you emotionally, or create a breakdown in performance when the stress levels get too high. And so in any given moment, the reality that you're creating is just a byproduct of what you believe to be true, because our brain is constantly scanning the information around us and deleting and distorting and generalizing the information to make it true for us and to perpetuate that reality that the identity wants to see us live in. And so if, I talk about it, I'm like, well, really, like, there's adulthood, right? Like, you leave your parents' house, and you're out on your own, you're trying to make your way. The really next level of adulthood is going back and analyzing all of your beliefs, because as a child, you took on all your parents and your community beliefs. And like, you could be frozen as a kid in many ways in those beliefs unless you go back and you analyze them and you ask yourself, well, and this is kind of how I have people do it, this framework to get some clarity around, like, how do you even uncover what your beliefs are? Well, you take inventory of your life. Let's say you're 25 years old, 30, 35, you do this at any age, but you ask yourself, okay, what scores would I give these different aspects of life? And just being real with yourself, like my mental health and well-being, like, how does it feel to be me every day? 1 to 10, give yourself a score. Where am I at with my physical health? 1 to 10, give yourself a score. My satisfaction with my career, what I'm doing for work, 1 to 10, give yourself a score. Finances, relationships, I break that into a few different buckets, from your work relationships to the people who, you're working with, and a lot of that relationship is based upon what you can do for them or others. And then your tribe, which is more about who you are rather than what you can do. And then your romantic relationship, and just analyze it and see, like, is there an area in your life or multiple areas where you give yourself a really low score? Bingo. That's where you've been programmed to fail. That's where you want to put your energy and start to uncover. Okay, well, what are my emotions that come up when I start to even feel into the area, right? Maybe it's an issue with money, and you're just like, oh, I'm always anxious. I'm always worried about money. It's not enough money. It's not enough money. Okay, let's feel into that. Go into the fear. Allow that to come up. Allow yourself to sit into that, because again, we talked about somatically is where these beliefs live in the physical body. You'll find that fear in the solar plexus area times. So you sit right in the middle of it and you ask yourself, what am I believing to be true about money or about my situation right now financially that make me feel so afraid? And if you sit deep into that, there's going to be a bubbling up of what that belief is. And then once you bring it to awareness, then you can start to move through the process of accepting it, surrendering into the past, and then alchemizing it, choosing the opposite belief to move forward with. And I have a lot of techniques, especially in the book I talk about, of like, how do we integrate that? How do we make it stick?
It's one of those things that and I'm glad that you brought up the financial aspect, because I think it's so timely for the work that you do. Whether you have a little bit of money or you have a lot of money, you're going to have anxiety around money for most people. You're going to be afraid of losing it, or you're going to be afraid of not making it. Same thing goes for success. I think a lot of people they're always looking for it, searching for it, hoping that they'll be enough once they get it, not recognizing that once they get it, then there's the fear of success on top of that, all the things that are going to come with that, all of the extra effort that you have to put in. Do I really want this? What about the judgment of others? Like, there's so many things that we don't really think about. Do you notice in the people that you work with, fear of success is probably more common than a fear of failure?
Yeah, at the highest level, it can definitely come to fruition. You know, one story comes to mind in particular. I was working with a first round draft pick, and, you know, he got this $30 million signing bonus, and I was working with him in his second season, and he just wasn't showing up as the best version of himself. Like, he wasn't doing the work to actually be as good as he could be. And what we uncovered was, subconsciously, he was believing that the more success he'd have, the more judgment he would get from the fans, from the media, from the coaching staff, from managers, from teammates. And so he was basically making the inference that more success equals more suffering. And so, in other words, like, he was afraid to succeed more, right? And so that fear of more success was being driven by the belief that, well, all this judgment, this negative judgment in particular, is going to come from more success. Because, of course, the more success you have, the bigger the stage get, the more eyeballs get on you, the more expectations grow. And so we had to move him through that, and we had to have him fully go into that. And he never would have come to that, you know, just on his own. We had to go deep, deep, deep into his body for this all to start bubbling up. Because if anyone would have asked him, hey, what's going on with you? He'd be like, oh, you know, man, I'm just not motivated. That's what a lot of people say. Oh, I just don't have the motivation. I need more motivation. It's like, that's not it, because what you really want is inspiration. Inspiration is limitless. It flows like, you know, a limitless river. It just keeps flowing and flowing and flowing. You feel like you need to force it with motivation when you have a blockage, right? So I think there's a real misconception around motivation, inspiration. Motivation is more like, how do I find it outside of me? Inspiration is limitless, and it flows from inside of you. And so that inspiration was unlocked as soon as we reprogrammed that beliefs for him. And now he's absolutely crushing it the last couple seasons. He's been an animal. He's one of the best players on the team, and he definitely has earned his contract.
So cool, man. Yeah, I think inspiration is being pulled towards something, and motivation's more being pushed. It's like that pull is like a calling. It's like I feel like that's probably a similarity of the people you work with. Is it's like they have no choice but to do the thing that they're doing. Like, that is their purpose in such a concrete way. And I think similar to what you're doing, I think anyone that does anything, their gift is the thing that they could not do, I feel. I'm curious from your journey. Like you said, when you were in college, there was the year that you sat on the bench. The next year you showed up and you really started to make some changes for things. Your first couple years in business also were a struggle as well. And then you built a 7-figure business. So you went from 80K in debt to 7 figures. What were some of the big needle movers that really allowed you to kind of make such quantum leaps in all facets of your life?
Yeah, you know, I think it was a lot of small changes that build up over time. And they just, it's kind of like you just keep finding new keys to unlock the next door, unlock the next door. And you enter into a new room, and then the room just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So I feel like it's not like an all at once type of thing. You know, I think we watch like documentaries, and we see motivational highlight reels, and we think like, oh, it's just like this thing clicked and then everything changed. And even books, right? Like writing my book, I couldn't really get into all the small minutia, and nobody can, of like what happened on this journey to get to me where I was. So I think, to sum it up, like, it was a lot of small things that happened along the way. And maybe I'll point to like a handful of them. You know, for football, I think a big one for me was just the belief that came from inside of myself once I started to actually see that I had more power over my life than I thought I did. And this is just very basic stuff. I think this is just like getting onto the path of awareness. Once I was able to start to learn some of these energy generating techniques, I was able to actually use them in the weight room and I got stronger. And then I was able to go to football camp and I saw it play out. I was use these techniques and they made me more powerful. Like I was bulldozing guys in the line. And so I was like, whoa, that belief at that point was not even like how I work now. It was more so like, okay, I learned something. I have awareness that there's different ways to go about enhancing performance. And then I put it into practice and it worked. And the belief was a byproduct of the physical results. I'd say now it happens more reverse. It's like I build a belief first and then I go do the thing. And that's kind of like the more advanced level. But most people do it the other way, right? They build belief through positive experience. And you can build belief both ways. You can either like try something, have success at it, build belief because you have all this evidence to look at, or you can build a belief beforehand, remove all the resistance, and then you can go take action on this direction you want to go in. So I think that was what it was for football. It was learning these techniques, breaking my patterns of believing that I was small and that I wasn't capable of being able to be a successful football player in college. Once I did that, the belief was built. I think once I got into entrepreneurship, I think I was very naive, and that led to a lot of my early success and failure. The first business I had, I launched a meditation app company because, 22 years old, no one was hiring me in professional sports to do my coaching. So I took it upon myself. Me and my buddy launched a meditation app company. So I started making meditations for all the sports that I wanted to help. Just everything you can imagine, meditations for sleeping, anything. And so through this company, it started to gain a little bit of traction. And I think actually there I had the naivety actually allowed us to get traction. I was like, of course it's going to work. I just believed it works. I didn't know anything otherwise. I never met anyone who had any success in business. And my only reference point was my buddy who already had a meditation app company that was making like $30,000 a month at 22 years old. So I was like, well, he's doing it. So of course I can do it. And then the debt that I got into was just like, after I had some traction there, believing that I could just do it with any company outside of, utilizing my unique gifts. Because my unique gift was the meditation, the actual content in the apps. But then I tried to bring this into a bunch of different fields and launch a bunch of apps on all these other fields of all these other disciplines. And once I did that, that's really where I started to get in trouble. That's where like things just didn't work. I overwhelmed myself. I was trying to do too much all at the same time. That's where I got into all the debt, was just living beyond my means and biting off more than I could chew. And then to dig my way out of that was just a byproduct of clearing the slate altogether, letting go of all that. I let my business partner acquire the meditation app company, which was my only income at the time, and letting go of all the other companies I was working on, and then moving down to Medellin, Colombia, and saying, let's just focus on one thing. And so I started focusing on building my own coaching business and just following my inspiration that came through that. A lot of like little small gigs along the way, learning about social media, learning about how to make content, how to talk on camera a little bit, led to me collaborating with my buddy to create that YouTube channel, which, I just was like, what worked the first time around? It was focusing on one thing. When I focused on just that one meditation app company, like we were starting to get some traction and went okay. So I was like, let me focus on one thing. Let's build this YouTube channel up. And by doing that, we got up the channel over 100 million views on YouTube, over 1 million followers on YouTube and Instagram, and just a massive social media following worldwide. So I think that at that point, I hadn't even uncovered really how to go through the reprogramming process. But what I was utilizing was a lot of the more basic tools that I was getting from the field of mental performance. So I was using things that like a lot of sports psychologists would give you, things like visualization, goal setting, affirmations. I would use the voice memo app on my phone almost like a therapist. I couldn't afford a therapist, so I would just be talking to it and just basically purging out all my greatest fears and frustrations. I just talk and talk and talk, get it all off my chest. Really, the next year, the business did X revenue, and we had our first 7-figure business year. And so that was definitely like a turning point for sure. But there was all these small little steps along the way of just kind of figuring it out and moseying along until I understood this process of programming.
I definitely want to go down that path of what that looks like now. There's so many things that I want to touch on. First off, when I was doing research for this podcast, when I found out you went to Medellin for a period of time, I think you met your wife there as well.
I did.
I'm going there in January. Like I've literally the past couple of days been figuring out flights to go down there.
Incredible.
So it's so timely. It's so funny that's a big thing. So
yeah, ask all your meditation questions. It's my second home.
Yeah. Oh, dude, we'll definitely be in contact after this. That's for sure. It's definitely a place I look forward to going to. It's been a place I wanted to go for a couple years. Joe Dispenza was someone that I came across 17, 18. I read a book, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, learned about visualization, mental rehearsal, accepting resistance. Like there's so many different forms of meditation, I guess you would say. How is your relationship with meditation, visualization? I know they're really different things. How has it changed over the years?
Yeah, it was one of my main tools that I started with. And so when I first got into this field, 18, 19 years old, it was, meditation was something I used for myself consistently. It was like one of my main tools that I used. And through the understanding of programming and how programming works, I've transitioned more so to really try to become meditation. I tell any of my clients this, I'm like, I want you to become meditation, which is, in other words, is like you are able to live your life from that state of conscious awareness in any moment. And so when something comes up and disrupts your energy field and it brings you into a lower emotional frequency, in that moment you can identify. And maybe you don't have to do the work on it in that exact moment, but you write it down on a note. You're like, okay, there's a trigger there. There's a pattern that needs to be broken. And when you live in meditation all the time, you can just observe your thoughts and emotions in that way. And when you have time, you can clean it up later on. And then as you continue to clean up the inner world, those issues don't happen as much. So meditation, like sitting and laying down or just going deep into meditation, is an extremely helpful tool. And I do it at times still. But the goal now is actually to transcend needing to go into that space to be able to feel good, to be able to be in a flow state, to be present, is to become meditation. But I definitely still use meditation. And in a lot of my coaching sessions, you could definitely call it meditative states that I'm getting people into, because I do different hypnosis style techniques. And, hypnosis is more or less meditation.
When people come to you, do you find that there's any kind of similarities or commonalities that you find that they're dealing with, challenges that they're trying to overcome, regardless of field or sport or business, whatever it may be?
Yeah, definitely. It's funny, I'm working on my next book, and it's a byproduct of me uncovering that, like, oh, wow, like there's all these similar patterns. I'm just going through all my coaching notes and I'm like, I should probably expose this. Like if everyone's having these same issues, I should just call it out, because everyone's going to feel like I'm talking personally to them. So I'll give you some of these that I see coming up over and over again. The first one is perfectionism. And this is something, it's more for these high achievers, people who are always looking for the next level, the next level, the next level. And so perfectionism will serve you to a point until it doesn't, right? So you leverage perfectionism to try to get better and better and better until it becomes like you start feeling like the next thing is make or break, right? The next move in business is make or break. If I don't get this right, if I lose this client, then like my business is over. And you start to feel that way, then you start to get anxious, you start to get tight, you start to get more at that sympathetic fight or flight nervous system, and you can't think as clearly. Same thing in sports. And you're in that perfectionism. It's like, if you're a pitcher, you're like, man, if this next pitch doesn't go well, like my career is over, right? And rationally, that sounds like it doesn't make any sense, but that's what the subconscious does. It goes to this extreme when you're suffering with perfectionism. So perfectionism is a huge one. Caring about what other people think of you. We talked briefly about the football player earlier who was dealing with that after he was drafted into the NFL. That's a huge one as well that I have to take a lot of, especially professional athletes through, just because there's so many eyeballs on them, so many people talking about them. Everybody has an opinion about them. I mean, you turn on ESPN, it's like their whole job, all these networks, their job is to talk about these people and have their opinions. And it's funny, like there's all like one of my clients is like really close with Tua from Miami, and like they're gonna go spend the week together, and like he can tell me exactly what's going on with him and the concussion and whether he's gonna come back or not. And then I'm watching ESPN, they're all just conjecturing. I'm like, they're just saying nonsense, they're just like saying stuff
They're
just
guessing.
to like say stuff, but they don't know anything. It's a very personal thing that's going on right now, and so they have to deal with that. That's a big one that just constantly comes up, is caring what people think of you. Another one is being able to do what's best for you and trusting that's going to be best for everyone else. When you have a significant level of success, I think you get to this place oftentimes of like obligation of like, okay, well, what do I owe everyone else? And whether it's people from my hometown or family or, teammates or employees, like what do I owe them? And actually oftentimes this disconnects people from that connection to the higher power of actually knowing within themselves what's best for themselves and trusting that, allowing that to guide them instead of guessing what they think is going to be best for everyone else. So that's a big theme as well that I see come up, is just trying to make sure everyone else is taken care of before yourself, which actually disconnects you from your higher power, which actually is worse from everyone else. I'll run through a few more of these. Victim, playing the victim, believing that, people screwed you over, that people are out to get you. Especially this can happen in business. People think they're screwing you over with like business deals. This can happen in sports. People, a team trades you and you're like, oh, how could you trade me during this situation? I had such a good situation here. Or, people try to take advantage of people in sports for business reasons and try to get their money. So that's a big one. And they get stuck in these patterns of victimhood. Another one, which I think everyone can resonate with, it's the I'm not worthy, I'm not enough. I think this is one that we don't need to go deep into. Everyone's pretty familiar with this. Fear, just fear. I believe that as children, I have two young girls, two young daughters, like they actually need fear so they don't hurt themselves. I think as adults, we need to grow into discernment and use discernment instead of fear. I think a lot of people get stuck on their fear still. So I'm oftentimes moving people through these fears they have. We talked about Power versus Force, the book that I have on my shelf here, just getting them to move into better fuel sources. We all watch The Last Dance with Michael Jordan, or we just assume, well, yeah, just being like constantly angry is the best way to have high performance. But that's using force. And like you could have a lot of success from there, but how would you like to have high performance and joy? And that's what happens when you leverage your power. So part of it is like getting people to grow through anger, into pride, into courage, into acceptance, and bringing them up into higher emotional frequencies. A few more here. We've got people oftentimes struggle with understanding what the integrated masculine is. There's a lot of questions around like masculine, feminine energies, and having men understand that being the integrated masculine means that you have the ability to be strong emotionally and physically. And so masculine just doesn't mean you turn off your emotions. True masculinity is being able to have emotional intelligence and be able to clean up your triggers so you can be in any situation and you're not going to be vulnerable to someone pushing a button and gaining control over you. The last couple are understanding the importance of the ego and having a strong ego and owning that. A lot of people are like, oh, I need to kill my ego. Well, I'll tell you, I've killed my ego. When the ego dies, there's no more human experience. So you got to come understand that we want to empower the ego through our programming to serve us and not be serving, this sense of egotism, which is like when you're egotistical, that means you need to be better than someone else to feel like you're enough. When you have a strong ego, you can just believe that, you're the man, and that's great for you. right? So that's like the difference, helping them understand you want a strong ego, you just don't want to be egotistical. And the last one is, even some people have no connection to any spirituality. Some people do, but either way, helping them get to a place where they can surrender to a higher power so they can just control the controllables. So I know I just talked for a while there, but I wanted to run you through these because these are the biggest patterns I've seen time and time again across my clients, especially professional athletes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's funny because no matter where you are, every single person deals with every single thing that you just mentioned at some shape or form in some way. We're not, it's never really ascending it. It's kind of like building a different relationship with it, similar to the ego. And I love that you bring up, like you said, that it's kind of living in meditation, not working from a place of anger, resentment, pride, because I mean, we just have this unwritten belief that we can't have like there's no and, it's this or that.
Yeah,
I think a lot of high performers, I'm curious from your perspective, they feel like if they don't put themselves through so much pain, even if they got to where they wanted to get to, it's like almost doesn't count, or it's not, I didn't do enough because I didn't put myself through enough stress and pain. Do you find that happen a lot?
for sure. I mean, I've definitely lived that story, I feel like I needed to go through I felt like I needed to go through all the suffering of like getting deep into debt and, you know, having no money in my bank account and constantly having in the red before like I earned it. Okay, now I can be successful, right? I've gone all the way to the bottom and beyond, and now I've earned it. So now I can be successful. Definitely. I think that, we get a lot of this programming around like just needing to force, grit, suffer, just eat shit and
Yeah.
just get through it and force and force and force. Because, some people get success that way, but I think like you said, like what they're missing is the and. A lot of them don't have and joy in the success and peace in the success and a state of acceptance in the success. And so really, and that's really why I'm more of a spiritual guide than anything else, is because I'm bringing people into these higher frequencies, bringing them closer to God, closer to that source that they believe in through transcending that anger, that fear, that pride, and getting them into courage, acceptance, peace, and joy when they're performing.
Reprogramming our subconscious mind, reprogramming all of it. From the first book that you wrote, excited to hear about the second one once it comes out, and would love to have you back on the show when it does. What did you learn about yourself through that journey? Because it seems like most of the authors that I speak to, they're writing the book, they're over the problem that they've dealt with probably the most in their life, or the one that they've dove deep into. Doesn't mean they've overcome it, but they've definitely built a better relationship with it.
Yeah. I mean, like, as the first part of the book is really about my story and how I went through this reprogramming process and what results I got from that. And so, well, writing the book was, I'll say, very cathartic. And I actually recommend it for anyone, especially once you start to get into your 30s and 40s, is when you write a book, you reframe all the stories about your life and you choose to write them in a way, or you can choose to write them in a way that empower you and make you feel like, okay, you know what, that happened for a reason and now I'm here because of it. Versus it's easy to just constantly tell yourself the story of like, this happened to me and there's just nothing good that came from it. But when you're writing a book, especially a biography type of book, you're realizing how you needed to experience everything you experienced to get to where you are today. And so it kind of puts things into order and alignment and helps you come to a state of deeper acceptance. So I'll say that. Obviously, this is very specific to someone who's doing a biography style book, at least a lot of cathartic energy being released. I think that's beautiful. And I love that part of the process, because especially when you're writing a book about yourself, like you can, in the first draft, you can just write everything in there. And most of it, is not going to end up in the actual book, but at least you get to say it and you get to expose it and you just get to get it out of you. And your editor's like, you don't need to tell people about that, but it's good that, you had the vulnerability to share it. And so the cathartic aspect of writing a book, I think, is beautiful. The other side of it, like you said, is like, yeah, in this type of book, especially one that I wrote, is like, I'm getting to share with people how my life transformed so much. Like, once I understood this reprogramming process, I literally made 3.5 times more money than I ever had before in my life. like as that transformative. And not only that, a lot of it is more like the money is one, here's a number, boom, watch the number switch. A lot of the other ones were more subtle. It's like the ability to be in my romantic relationship with my wife and just feel at peace in it and not be triggered by anything. Where in the past, like I would just feel like an emotion come up. Oh, this triggered me. I'm angry about this, or this makes me feel afraid, and just be unconscious to why. And now I just get to live in a peaceful relationship, and like there's just really no triggers. And once in a while, if one comes up, I know how to deal with it. And so it's really all these subtle aspects of just understanding why you feel the way you do in any aspect of your life, and how to gain back control over the outcomes you're getting by understanding what drives your behavior. So yeah, writing the book was me getting to share that and that personal transformation. And then of course I talk about a number of my clients in the book as well, and how I share these techniques with them and the results that they got, and just showing people there's another way. It's another path forward.
Yeah. You've worked with some exceptional humans, and it's funny that you bring up the voice memos prior, because that is the exact same thing that I've done for so long. There's so much that you get from just releasing just everything. Maybe you don't have someone to go to. Maybe journaling, your hand gets tired after 2 sentences, but just releasing something into the world, man, it feels so good. A question I'd love to ask a lot of people, because this is like my form of learning from people that I would love to learn from, save some time in my life and hopefully save some time with my audience as well. What's something that you've spent a lot of time on, knowing that you've been in this space for 15 plus years, that I or my audience should skip entirely? And this could be mental energy that you spend a lot of time on, or physical energy, something that you wish that you could go back and maybe just spend too much time on it.
Yeah. The biggest thing is needing to figure out the how, like this desire to know how is this going to happen? How do I do this? How? I think people get so stuck on the how. Some people get so stuck on the how that they never even get started. Other people get so obsessed with the how that they're constantly feeling like they don't know how. And so then they start to splinter their energy and they start to do other things. And then they lose traction on the thing that they were working on. Or maybe they get to a level of success and they're like, okay, how do I proceed forward from here? And this how is all coming from the head. It's trying to figure it out in your head versus, and this is something I used to do. It's like, how? What I realized is how is for cowards, because it's not trusting in God, not trusting that something is actually guiding you and putting you on a path to get to where you need to go. And you may not even know right now consciously where that is. And then that's what it is. It's like life continues to unfold for us in every moment, and we don't know what's headed down their timeline in their life. Like what's in the future, we don't know. And we don't want to know. If you had it all figured out, it wouldn't be very interesting. And so that's the biggest thing that I've learned and I'm continuing to work on. That's one of my biggest patterns, is like let go of the how and just connect to myself in the present moment and follow my inspiration. And so, I have like priorities for my life. And so right now, my priorities, number one is always ask myself, what is inspiring me right now? And so that's always going to guide the action that I take. And so it's not from up here. It's not from the head, and this goes against, I think, a lot of like productivity hacks, and people trying to convince you that there's one way to get to success. Is, yeah, no, for me, it's starting with following inspiration. And then once I've exhausted that inspiration in the moment, then I have like my priorities, which are the things that I love to do, which is coach my clients and then right now write my book. And so I always leave that space for what is inspiring for me right now and letting that be the number one driver, because who knows what the inspiration, where that inspiration might lead me.
Yeah. It's so egotistical of us to think that we have such an ability to control life, when a belief that has really stuck true to me is life is unfolding exactly how it's supposed to. And just believing in that, trusting in that, has done really wonders for me, and just releasing so much of the control that I just genuinely don't have control over. And we try to control things so much. It's a part of our programming, right? We feel as though this false sense of certainty of holding on to something or trying to control things gives us a feeling of control that we genuinely don't have. You talked about reprogramming earlier and your life really changed after it. Do you have anything applicable, like actionable things that people can do to understand? I know like when you first start working with clients, you help them, set alarms every few hours, check in how they're feeling, because it's crazy to think how unaware we are of how we're actually feeling in our body, but it's more common than not. But once they have the awareness, what are some of the steps that people can take to actually start reprogramming their mind?
Yeah, well, I'd say it is a longer path, I think that most people have to start with those first steps of awareness. They have to set a baseline for their entire life, understand where they are, where they're starting, um, get to a level of awareness of like, okay, well, where do I want to go? If let's say I look at my mental health and I'm like, I feel like a 6 out of 10 usually. What would a 10 out of 10 feel like? And describe that. And then just start to take on the low hanging fruit first, because it's like there's a lot you can do to make change in your life, even before you get to like the deeper levels of programming. And I think people need to take that on, kind of like give themselves some momentum as they're going through this process. So just asking yourself, okay, what is some inspired action that I feel like taking, knowing that I'm here right now, I'm at a 6, and this is what it would be like to be a 10, you know? And it's all going to be like, you always know, like you'd be like, okay, you know what? Uh, I drink too much coffee and that makes me feel anxious. So I'm going to limit myself to 1 coffee a day. Right. Or it's like, you know what, whenever I go out and I drink so much and I hang out with these people or these environments, like I wake up the next day and I feel bad. Okay, you know what? Like I'm going to limit myself to going out and partying to, something I do less often, whatever it is, once a month, once a quarter, whatever it may be. But just like the low hanging fruit, take that on for every aspect of your life. Then, like you said, you can start to set these alarms, which I recommend every few hours. Just become aware of how it feels to be you, because as we've discussed, like it's a somatic thing. It's in the physical bodies where these beliefs live. And so a lot of clients, when they first start with me, if I ask them, hey, how does it feel to be you? They're telling me about their physical sensations, or they're telling me about how they think about their life and actually feeling. And so that's actually a muscle a lot of people have to build, is the ability to just feel their body, feel safe in that experience of feeling it. And so it takes time to do that. And that's kind of why I wrote the book the way I did, giving people a full roadmap of like, do this and then this and this and this and this, part 2 of it. So they can build themselves up to this level of awareness to when they get to actually feeling their feelings and they see how their focus is driving some of the feelings they experience. They've already handled all the low hanging fruit. They started the things they need to start. They cut out the bad habits. They're in a good rhythm. Then they can go deeper into their body. And the question is always, you feel the resistance, which is a negative emotion in your body. So you feel the fear, you feel the anger, you feel the sadness. You connect to it in your physical body and you ask yourself, what am I believing to be true right now that would make me feel this way? And you just sit into that question, and you sit into it as long as it takes for something to bubble up. And it doesn't come from the head. It comes from connecting to that physical sensation in the body. And the body will tell you, will say, well, and it might not be like a real clear sentence. Sometimes it might be an image that you see in your mind, or maybe it is a word, maybe it's a phrase, maybe it's a story that starts unfolding for you. Maybe it's a memory of the past, but it's a process of being able to uncover, okay, well, oh, I just had a triggered memory of like when I was 6 years old and, some kids were making fun of me, right? And how you might have to go back to that memory and sit into that. You just follow the thread of whatever it is. Okay, how does it feel to be then? Well, oh, I feel stupid when I show people who I really am. Oh, wow. So why do I, maybe it's someone who wants to put out a podcast. Well, why don't I just start it? Why do I feel stuck here? Why am I not consistent? Because I believe that when I show people who I really am, they're going to make fun of me. Boom. We found a limiting belief, a program that is holding you back, and we need to accept that, surrender it, and transmute it.
We as humans have a real tendency to address the symptom to the problem and not the underlying root cause of the problem. And it's like you've said plenty of times, of what we cannot accept, we cannot change. And so sitting in those emotions that the number one thing we want to is avoid, is the first step to confronting them. I have 2 more questions for you. And then, what is the biggest misconception that people have about our programming as a whole?
Well, I'd say the first one is people don't even know it exists. You and I having this conversation, it seems very matter of fact, but most people have no idea what we're talking about. And if they do, they've heard people talk about beliefs or programming, but it's an intellectual concept and they don't understand how it actually is driving their life. They don't understand that there's a supercomputer in our subconscious that drives all of our behaviors and feelings, and that these beliefs are not just something that live in our head. They're something that drive our feelings and our behavior in every single moment and are actually creating the reality we experience. So I think just people understand that concept, the gravity to how important they are to dig in here and do this work and how transformative it can be. Yeah, I don't know. That's the big one. I'm trying to think of a second one, but I think it's just like something has to click at some point. And I think it's when you first started getting experience of the work and you experience a shift in whether it's a physical result outside of yourself, the way that you feel, or maybe it's a behavior habit that you haven't been able to stick with in the past and now you're able to change. People need to go through that process of just having one program change and seeing the domino effect that has in their life. I think through that, it starts to click, and then you want to go down the rabbit hole where you're like, well, what else is possible?
Fully with you. That's why the awareness is the biggest part, right? Because we just have to gain that awareness to begin with. We don't know what's driving us, but if we have the awareness of why we're making certain decisions, well, then we can actually start taking steps to move forward. One thing I find that me and you are definitely in alignment on is that we have everything that we need within us. It's more so unlearning and letting go of the things that we need to let go of in order to actualize our life, actualize ourselves. That really is the core of this last question. My question to you is, what belief are you currently unlearning?
That I need the belief that I need to know how to be successful. Yeah, that's it right there. Kind of what I pointed to or alluded to earlier, that I need to know the how instead of just trusting that it's all just going to unfold for me as long as I follow that inspired action in the present moment.
I love it, man. Thank you so much for your time. Of course, all your links and everything will be in the show notes below. But is there anywhere you'd like to direct people?
Yeah, I think a great place to start is a book, Program to Fail. In addition to that, if anyone was inspired by this conversation and the work that I'm doing, the work we've been discussing, and they want to get on this path, like, you know what? I've always felt the calling to bring this to people, and I want to go deeper down this path myself. I started a coaching certification program so people can get trained by me to do this and understand how I got into professional sports and how I'm able to make my living, having time freedom and being able to play at the highest level. So if anyone's interested in that, they can reach out as well. They can email me, Brandon at theown.industries, or go to my website, thebrandonepstein.com.